Hello, America. There are mass identity theft, frauds, and slanders, and roles putting everyone and their peers to fake and change communications with each other, including our families. At and next to each of the campuses I went, there are connections between those people, as ones evolved interstates and internationally. Also, per worse, with the World Trade Center attack. For example, on Valley Crest Street, there used to be a campus on that street. Increasingly, people involved with the Tomorrow House on that street are increasingly involved putting with their educators too, putting fake things in databases and then acting tied to those predicate acts because they are also predicate acts. They have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, as people involved with the businesses and houses next to Harvard Hospital's campus and the Institute of Living, concentrated part of it, but it's with the security with there, the military, foreign and domestic intelligence. And these are one's roles with the World Trade Center attack. Increasingly, they affected confessions to me from strangers, people involved with Cuba, too, with psychiatry, with the military, their roles before the World Trade Center attack in and since. With torture, no. All of a sudden, everyone's using the words like extremism, no, and radical, tactical terrorism, how they've been using them since we were kids. Sickly distinctly, they can't teach English right and each of the sciences. For example, English and law, English values the predicate to discern the invisible but still discernible, slash hyper invisible but still discernible, for what we are appreciating with the appreciation of the predicate as a name hyper additional for a verb, for example. And why and how the identity that is all things at the same time as itself, distinctly from all things, so we can discern it. In other words, I'm going to change all the words. There are all kinds of behavior racketeering roles, including online, people say changing and faking what they think about what others say, including as interbranch families and foreign and domestic intelligence. And they jump into our conversations dishonestly. In other words, and when there are exceptions, they use those truths as lies. That, in other words, Facebook has roles with the word extremism, with some child sexual and medical offenders, and police refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and they have their extended family members, immediate family members, involved with foreign and domestic intelligence, including medical offenders of kids, putting fake transcripts into databases on a mass scale, putting fake and changed audio and video, collusions with use of that and of demonstrations of it, instead used effectively to keep people blaming other things other than themselves for negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and or simultaneously too relative criminal and seditious nature of positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And the difference of that, because it's also used to screen the identity of relativity to us of the human factual nature breaching method that is also a scientific value replaced right from the communications of our founders, even though it's declassified. For example, it was declassified that our founders did not have free speech. And we don't have experts. We have experts still telling American history the way the breaching method forced it to be taught. All exceptions and exception nature is about James Madison's plan, but everyone has that replaced. And that plan was with founders behind him, plural, that referred to themselves as him, told us to refer to him as him singular, and his plan to understand as our founders, plural, to explain our founders. And then they went and got George Washington counter-extorted it, but agreeing to help them and to use that plan and to force the other founders, the other citizens, including ones as Native Americans. There are proofs that Native Americans helped James Madison and the rest of the colonists behind him. There are proofs that Native Americans were also with them. They told us to respect the president slash chief, and nature does too. Anyway, they're our founders anyway, and thank God, even though it's bad, it's positive in the sense that everyone had the same hyper foreign criminal foreign influence breaching method against ourselves as the human species body of individual bodies. All group differences no longer allowed to be appreciated properly syntactically. And nature used as criminal says nature's a positive treatments like even calm or aggression used to keep proper uses of those, which is different if you're using passion and emotion. If someone says, "Oh, with a disagreement," how we disagree? We have black people's whites of eyes, for example. If someone gets violent to defend that, but no one ever did, and no one ever lets people calmly use that as evidence. It is all kinds of evidences surging from it because that's its identity itself. The one that shows us it's projecting to us. It's how it is demonstrating to us how it is generating the other species bodies too, with quality aspects in nature distinct, but also non-distinct and simultaneous too, so we can discern for how there's a further hyper simultaneous nature slash hyper simultaneous nature, because there are parts of its complete self that are juxtaposed without discernment of its complete self because of the relativity of those parts to the rest of itself that won't juxtapose with matter and with the portion that juxtaposes anyway. But part of it juxtaposes anyway. Part of it is juxtaposed with matter, and part of it will not juxtapose with matter. The Trinity, Jesus' name and Allah's name, and other names for God are revealed by a science that also reveals what it is revealing. These are scientific terms for the process of staying led by that which is, hyper invisible but still discernible in true all ways, not leaving out the smallest finite detail, not valuing someone leaving it out. Questions its way and contemplation its way. Care about if we are right or wrong about just even the discernment of the difference between criminal and citizen's natures of positive treatments, true treatments, or peace treatments. A through Z, there is worse than criminal incompetence at our countries and campuses. For the campuses still breach, but from off them too. So there are layers of hyper additional predicate acts with facts roles, organized crime roles. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed completely on their own, and the DeMorrow family and others completely on their own. The town green in Old Wethersfield and other conjunctions to the state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices. They have roles with all kinds of natures of people with child abusers and people involved with the former director of the FBI, who is involved with confessing, demonstrating, confirming them involved with this. Also with a whole bunch of people with their educators putting predicate acts with facts in databases at Central Connecticut State University, and they're forging names and switching names. There's a detective Samuda involved with people with the business offices, and there's a Parker English involved with people too with the name tomorrow and FBI all along Walker Hill and Wethersfield, involved with people with Central Connecticut State University, along Route 175 in conjunctions to it like Walker Hill. They have something to do with their planting evidences with the World Trade Center attack, including the Saudi side and the American side. And the attackers used remotely criminally foreign influence, fact, true nature, quality aspects, and nature of collusion as like a shell game with a whole array. And the people observing are a difference. Their differences too have been used remotely. On a mass scale, there's behavior racketeering at triages, interstates and internationally. Through world wars, there was psychiatry, involve all kinds of natures of organized crimes. There are people in Congress and next to the state capital of Connecticut, involved also with sexual and medical offenders and pretending passions and emotions about things like the Holocaust, where and how they're involved with sequence shifts, cover-ups that way, and cover-ups of differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, right? Where and how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time projected to us, but that which answers all questions better than perfectly, because understanding its way is, only increasingly valued because it is true with all ways. No, in other words, humanity didn't invent how there are other species bodies of individual bodies with their own group differences and demonstration of the same thing. There are other species bodies from them too. So there's one identity of value / value progression that is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. Many pray because there are no longer formal defenses of syntax proper, of nature proper, treatments proper, all natures of experts individually grouped in together, their differences individually grouped in together. They were employed, for example, with American history experts as sensibilities, pretending not to realize and not realizing, for criminally, but all mixed, but criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, wrought, fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature also juxtaposed with that being and having been at all locations / s. Then further with database identities of relativity. Then further with the campuses ones, and with exceptions too, and where and how this is relative to where and how this is multi-front against what is proper descriptions or methods of measuring the intelligence or what is smart and wise and the difference between it at each age of fact treatment nature. We're supposed to understand that and how our founders wanted nothing to do with slavery and to use all the proofs of it, not just how they told us to get the Constitution unabridged and appreciated why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list, let alone both branches of government that can't afford to have witch trials contemplated because it would bring up the rest of the laws that were entrenched at the time. And how what's actually recorded is the difference of their guilt. The overt criminal enterprises, the private ones of the terrorists, they self-value roles of that, their appreciation of that too, while having been used remotely for that too. This breaching method was an identity of hyper sophistication here before our founders were born, before our founders' parents were born. It had been sustained against before religious messengers were born from off the campuses of the world. Their influences that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded them to self-value roles, but not like you guys think, and right where they didn't self-evaluate, but it made exceptions. For example, it hurt people at locations, areas, and states, so they would use the name of their unity, like the names of our countries, to blame others wrongly because they didn't know how to do it properly. And then those people counter them wrongly, fact, cheap, nature-wise, increasingly screening the breaching method that caused that and is maintaining that. And specifically, too, additionally, simultaneously, / hyper simultaneously to keep nature's demonstrations of it and all identities of practical reason, syntax, and postures, collusions with those demonstrations instead forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed on other things, others ourselves instead. And that increasingly relied on being and having been, while pretending people could speak for practical reason. People could speak for free speech about what's going on when other people speak about things There were only three branches of government. They never had rights to keep their crime methods up, pretending we have to sue for our rights to get them on paper and to get them to put the fake things they put in the databases out, and the methods too, to hide, to stop hiding that. They've been putting arrays of falsified police reports into databases, and they don't show that. They just give a charge and they put confessions about their roles doing that, switching the arresting officers' names on a mass scale, all records of what transpired in life. They're even putting fake ties to kids at Weathersfield Police Station. And then years later, when they're adults, they're covering up live aggressions. Then they're having to hide that with the news. Increasingly, they're implying it's got to do, they have roles with nuclear energy or whatever because of their uses of the right to lie, where they don't have the right to lie and they're pretending they can speak about truth anyway. The news media. In other words, every individual voice, no matter how powerful they could be, no matter if it's the most powerful leader, like a new form of leader, the most powerful country, even grouped countries, as long as there are locations, areas, and states still entertain blaming and having blamed, and valuing having been blamed too. The real causes of criminally foreign influence, fact, nature, quality aspects of nature at locations, areas, and states. Self-valued and/or roles, self-valued, blaming on other things, others, or ourselves. Nature's demonstrations of it. In other words, our founders of communications are replaced in our face. You guys are preventing me from freedom of speech with the interbranch that are refusing to identify and have refused to identify themselves legitimately. Now you guys are making me tell on you guys with the Hartford courts and their family members and intimate ties. I tried to mind my business. They want to have debates about things they can't afford to debate legitimately. Their roles with all kinds of predicates, all kinds of natures of organized crime and medicines crimes. How many times they've recorded themselves dishonestly and tactically delusions raw, pretending that they're not doctors, so they can't speak on the mind. These are people putting fake things in databases and fake conversations, but pretend they're doctors. In other words, they got their family members too, with the families of prosecutors and judges with the same house/s, increasingly directly and indirectly roles with them since I was a kid. And the news pretended I had conversations and mental diagnosis as a kid. That was never at all either. With doctors that I caught in the houses involved with them with that, with child sex offenders roles, with the principal upskirt nature role, and not just that, untimely death roles, and the roles with overt criminal enterprises with the private ones, and with the interbranch and that in a whole bunch of different countries with their own differences and other people's differences, involved with different and styles, using words like extremism and radical too, where there are formally roles with the people in the comments too, that are so they can pretend that that's the opinion of people. There's a Joshua Julian planting evidences with child sex offenders, with Facebook leaderships, with people all along Route 175, which is also part of it is called Wells Road, and they even have a Celeste Wells involved with Facebook, including through administrations, people through administrations involved with World Trade Center predicate acts and fake transcripts into databases and the equivalent of value uses of it roles. So increasingly, too, the business department and people associated with Parker English are involved with a whole bunch of people, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, people out of the state corrections offices, state judicial branch offices, who are also involved with predicate acts with corners of streets on Church Street in Old Weathersfield, with people involved with home break-ins in my area through time, and people involved with, with criminal enterprises, involved with rape confessions and threats against little grammar school girls and middle school girls, with ones who pretended they knew people that went to the grammar school campuses that they didn't even go to, and ones that were at the campus, they don't even know them. And ones where they check one big quick exception and they pretend they know you, and then years later they're increasingly people tied to them with live progressions and all kinds of natures of bad things with them. And planted evidence on all sides of people's houses and all sides of theirs. There's a method of keeping a bunch of fakes pretend incapable of treatment of any subject properly. Certain and right where it hurts them and other people around they don't in ways they don't want. That's why you guys need to follow mandated law. Now the police are recorded. They put the police forms together too. Multiple police departments with the same house slash S personally and professionally involved with them, timed into cities, planting evidences and exploiting that. Oh, we're only with this district, and they're on the town lines too through time. I don't even know the name of Ray Colol, the guy reportedly his roommate. He's planting evidences with people at next to Fox Connecticut News and the buildings next to it. Fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and they do things that will make people angry, so they can pretend that was the motivations because they're screaming motivations. These are people involved with some body dumping spots and identity thefts and frauds and wire crime acts and methods with some foreign and domestic military on off 2-route highway, involved with a bunch of prosecutors and judges and their family members and victims advocates with a criminal enterprise involved with proven first force child abusers, leaders of kids, including sexual and digital, and ones years apart who had time to use /S roles with that and collusions with that at the same time, years later too. And the same, what brought that up to me was the untimely deaths. And a whole bunch of people tied to the Kevin Dillon and the guy who said he was his partner, and increasingly people tied to him involved with home break-ins in my area, also with state police families and people tied to them confessions at the same time with a whole bunch of different countries and people with Middletown locations and next to Central Connecticut State University. And they changed what they say. Investigators are consciously being used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. Then they get people's kids and their adults and their family, overt criminal indication.